Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Ajnanatirandasya Jnananjana Salakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadah Mahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandyaham Shri Guru Shri Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Cha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Shri Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Sri Visakham Shri Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpati Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namaste Saptakanchana Gaurangi Shri Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sukti Devi Pranamami Harin Priya Panchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhavaivata Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Mukham Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langayate Grim Yatkripatamaham Vande Shri Guru Dinataranam Pramananda Madhavam Shri Krishna Chaitanya Ishwaram Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narotamam Devim Saraswati Vyasam Tato Jayamudhiraye Nashtaprayasha Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavate Sevaya Bhagavate Uttam Slokir Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna. Thank you. Hare Krishna Mataji. How are you doing? You're muted. You're muted, Mataji. You're muted.
Hare Krishna, please accept my humble obeisance. Everyone, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Nice to see you, Mataji.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Please accept my humble obeisance.
Haribol.
Yes.
It's great.
Haribol.
Great to be back. Great to be back in Africa. Great to be in Nakuru. Things are going very well. We had a lovely Sunday feast yesterday. Many guests came. It was wonderful. Very encouraging. So today we're reading from Canto 2, Chapter 6, Text 36, the continuation of Purusha Shukta Confirmed. And I won't do the Sanskrit, it's complex. I'll just do the translation. Therefore, it is best for me to surrender unto his feet, which alone can deliver one from the miseries of repeated birth and death. Such surrender is all auspicious and allows one to perceive all happiness. Even the sky cannot estimate the limits of its own expansion. So what can others do when the Lord himself is unable to estimate his own limits? Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Lord Brahma is the greatest of all learned living beings, and the greatest sacrificer, the greatest observer of the austere life, and the greatest self-realized mystic, advises us, as the supreme spiritual master of all living beings, that one should simply surrender unto the lotus feet of the Lord in order to achieve all success, even up to the limit of being liberated from the miseries of material life and being endowed with all auspicious spiritual existence. Lord Brahma is known as the Pitamaha, or the father's father. A young man consults his experienced father about discharging his duties. So the father is naturally a good advisor, but the Lord Brahma is the father of all fathers. He is the father of Manu, who is the father of mankind all over the universal planets. Therefore, the men of this insignificant planet should kindly accept the instruction of Brahmaji and would do well to surrender unto the lotus feet of the Lord rather than try to estimate the length and breadth of the Lord's potencies. His potencies are immeasurable, as confirmed in the Vedas, Parasya Shaktir Vividaya Shuryate, Swabhavika Jana Bala Kriyacha, Svetasvatara Upanishad. He is the greatest of all, and all others, even the greatest of all living beings, namely Brahmaji, admits that the best thing for us is to surrender unto him. Therefore, only those persons with a very poor fund of knowledge claim that they themselves are lords of all that they survey. And what can they survey? They cannot survey even the length and breadth of a small sky in one small universe. The so-called material scientist says that he would need to live for 40,000 years to reach the highest planet of the universe, being carried by a Sputnik. This is also utopian, because no one can be expected to live 40,000 years. Besides, when the space pilot returned from his travel, none of his friends will be present to receive him back as the greatest astronaut, as has become fashionable for modern bewildered scientific men. One scientific man who had no belief in God was very much enthusiastic in making plans for his material existence and therefore opened a hospital to save the living. But after opening the hospital, he himself died within 6 months. So one should not spoil his human life, which is obtained after many, many changes of bodies in 8,400,000 species of life, simply for the concocted material happiness of life through increasing artificial needs in the name of advancement of economic development and scientific knowledge. Rather, one should simply surrender unto the feet of the Lord to make a solution to all miseries of life. That is the instruction of Lord Krishna directly in Bhagavad Gita, and that is the instruction of Srimad Bhagavatam by Brahmaji, the Supreme Father of all living beings. Anyone denying this surrendering process, as recommended both in Bhagavad Gita and in Srimad Bhagavatam, and for that matter in all authorized scriptures, will be forced to surrender unto the laws of material nature. The living entity, by his constitutional position, is not independent. He must surrender either unto the Lord, unto the material nature. Material nature is also not independent of the Lord, since the Lord himself has claimed material nature as Mama Maya, or my energy. Bhagavad Gita, chapter 7, verse 14. And as Me Bina Prakatir Astada, or my separated energy in 8 divisions. Bhagavad Gita, chapter 7, verse 4. Therefore, material nature is also controlled by the Lord, as he has claimed in Bhagavad Gita 9:10. Ayadjakshena prakati suyate sacharacharam. Under my direction only is material nature working, and thus are all things moving. And the living entities, being superior energy to matter, have choice and discrimination either to surrender unto the Lord or to surrender unto material nature. By surrendering unto the Lord, one is happy and liberated, but by surrendering unto material nature, the living entity suffers. So the end of all suffering means surrendering unto the Lord, because the surrendering process itself is Bada Chidam, liberation from all material miseries, Swasyayanam, perception of all happiness, and Sumangalam, the source of everything auspicious. Therefore, liberty, happiness, and all good fortune can be attained only by surrendering unto the Lord, because he has full liberty, full happiness, and full auspiciousness. Such liberation and happiness are also unlimited, and they have been compared to the sky, although such liberation and happiness are infinitely greater than the sky. In our present position, we can simply understand the magnitude of greatness when it is compared to the sky. We fail to measure the sky, but the happiness and liberty obtained in association with the Lord are far greater than the sky. That spiritual happiness is so great that it cannot be measured, even by the Lord himself, not to speak of others. It is said in the scriptures, Brahma Sokyam Twantan Tanam. Spiritual happiness is unlimited. Here it is said that even the Lord cannot measure such happiness. This does not mean that the Lord cannot measure it and is therefore imperfect in that sense. The actual position is that the Lord can measure it, but the happiness in the Lord is also identical with the Lord on account of absolute knowledge. So the happiness derived from the Lord may be measured by the Lord, but the happiness increases again and the Lord measures it again. And then again the happiness increases more and more and the Lord measures it more and more. And as such, there is eternally a competition between increment and measurement. So much so that the competition is never stopped, but goes on unlimitedly ad infinitum. Spiritual happiness, anandam buddhi vardhanam, or the ocean of happiness which increases. The material ocean is stagnant, but the spiritual ocean is dynamic. In Chaitanya Charitamrita Adi Leela 4th chapter, Kaviraj Goswami has very nicely described this dynamic increment of the ocean of spiritual happiness in the transcendental person of Srimati Radharani, the pleasure potency of Lord Krishna. Wow, that's quite a purport. Om Jnana Timirandasya Ganangana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. So we see this, Prabhupada is quoting, of course, in the last part of the purport from the Shikshastakam, which we recite every morning. And the first verse is Chetodarpana Marjanam Bhava Mahadavagni Nivarpanam Shreya Karavya Chandrika Vitaram Vijajavadu Jivanam Anandam Buddhi Vardhanam Prati Padam Punam Rishtas Vardhanam Sarvatma Snapanam Param Vijayate Sri Krishna Sankirtanam. Glory to the Sri Krishna Sankirtan, which cleanses the heart of all the dust accumulated for years and extinguishes the fire of conditional life of repeated birth and death. This Sankirtan movement is the prime benediction for humanity at large, because it spreads the rays of the benediction moon. It is the life of all transcendental knowledge. It increases the ocean of transcendental bliss, and it enables us to fully taste the nectar for which we are always anxious. It's interesting how in the last line, Srila Prabhupada is saying, to give the purport to his earlier mention where he says, here it is said that even the Lord cannot measure such happiness. This does not mean that the Lord cannot measure it and is therefore imperfect, because the happiness is constantly increasing. And as the happiness is increasing, how can it be measured? You know, it's like an amazing situation. In the material world, we have the opposite situation. We have nothing but anxiety, constant anxiety. And then that anxiety is even increasing more and more and more. We have the daily activities of our daily progress in life. And we go on in life from day to day, and we try to mitigate the anxiety that we feel constantly in our lives. But then in the spiritual world, it's completely the opposite. As is described in Bhagavad Gita, the material world is completely upside down. It's like a banyan tree. So we're seeing the banyan tree upside down. The roots are in the sky, and the branches and the leaves are in the water. So we're in a completely topsy-turvy world, and we accept this world as the reality of life, when in actual fact it is completely the opposite. So in order to appreciate or begin to appreciate spiritual life in all its glories, We have to give up the material consciousness, but we've become so attached to it. It's like tearing apart. It's like ripping the heart out of the body. We have great difficulty in trying to connect with the spiritual consciousness because the material world is so strong and is so prone to dragging us down. So on the last line, Prabhupada gives the kind of synopsis, if you want, when he says, Kaviraj Goswami has very nicely described this dynamic increment of the ocean of spiritual happiness. It's a beautiful poetic way in which Prabhupada describes spiritual life in its purports. The ocean of spiritual happiness in the transcendental person of Srimati Radharani, the pleasure potency of Lord Krishna. And this is the beauty of our relationship with the Lord, is directly connected with Srimati Radharani. Of course, we have been warned on so many occasions not to jump over and go straight into the 10th canto and just think that we're gopis dancing with Lord Krishna and end up being classified in the Sahaja category. That's not the point. But also, we cannot ignore the fact that this is our destiny. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he came to give us the highest goal of prema bhakti. And the highest perfection of prema bhakti is as a gopi in Vrindavan. So we become the servant of the servant of the servant of the gopis, a million times removed, the servant of the servant. That is still in a supremely elevated position. Just to come in contact with this society, to come in contact with ISKCON, to come in contact with the devotees, is such a rare thing. As Prabhupada says in the purport to the Gita, Samahatma Sudurlabha, this is just an amazingly rare occasion. So to get back to the beginning of the purport, where Prabhupada is explaining the greatest of all learned beings, Lord Brahma, he himself doesn't understand the limits of Krishna's mercy. He cannot even begin, and his body is made of intelligence. He's the greatest person in the universe. He created the universe under the instructions of the Lord. And he himself cannot begin to appreciate the unlimited variety of the universal sky. And Prabhupada gives the kind of funny example, if you want, of the spaceman who travels to space to reach the outer limits of the topmost planet in the universe. And Prabhupada gives the example that it will take 40,000 years to do so. Of course, a utopian idea. It's completely insane. But at the same time, what is he going to achieve by reaching to that? Prabhupada has written the book long before he came to the West, we must recall. And I think it was published in 1956. Prabhupada has written the book, Easy Journey to Other Planets, which we distribute in great quantities all over the world. But Prabhupada wrote that in India long before he came to New York. And it's a very big popular seller. I remember when in the early days when I joined, it was still the kind of the tail end of the hippie movement, and we used to sell this book in the tens of thousands, and all the hippies spaced out on drugs and everything at the festivals that we would go to. They would buy this book in really large quantities. Easy Journey to Other Planets. So if we want an easy journey, if we really want to go to higher planets, we want to go to different areas of the material sphere where we can enjoy unlimitedly, then we can do that. We can do that. But at the same time, we're also going to come back down to earth, even after 40,000 years traveling, as Prabhupada is explaining here. The space pilot, when he returns from his travel, none of his friends will be around. And everybody wants the glory. Everybody wants to be lauded and applauded and given the glory. And as Prabhupada says, again, in a kind of a mocking way, but none of his friends will be present to receive him back as the greatest astronaut as has become fashionable for modern, bewildered scientific men. So that's like Prabhupada hinting in the purport how the idea that they went to the moon is just a joke. Prabhupada said they denied it straight away. As soon as Prabhupada saw this on the TV, all the devotees were watching it in 1969. When Lance Armstrong set foot on the moon, they were watching it live on the TV, and Prabhupada said, no, definitely not. They got a TV from somewhere, and the first time Prabhupada was watching it, and Prabhupada said, no, that didn't happen. They didn't go to the moon. That's not the moon. So that was probably done in the desert somewhere in Arizona, and that's exactly where they filmed it. And they just put on the whole show, and the whole world fell for it, because the whole world is completely bewildered, because there's no leadership, there's no direction, no goal, no direction, simply animated clay. That's all people are. They're simply animated clay. They just go along with whatever they're told by their so-called authorities, and the whole world is ruled by sudras. Everything is upside down, completely upside down. And again, in a kind of a mocking way, Prabhupada gives the example of the man who opened the hospital and to cater for the living when they were diseased, and he himself dies after 6 months. So you cannot escape. We cannot escape the laws of karma. We cannot escape the laws of action and reaction. And Prabhupada just puts it so succinctly when he says, do not spoil this human life, which is obtained after many, many changes of body in 8,400,000 species. So the Bhagavatam is so scientific, it numbers the number of species. And here the so-called scientists are discovering this species and that species and another living entity and something else living in the bottom of the sea and living in the bottom. They're all just grabbing at straws, like a drowning man grabbing at a straw. They haven't a clue what they're doing. And then if we accept them as some kind of authority, and we accept them as some kind of guide in our life, then we are also so foolish. Rather, one should simply surrender unto the feet of the Lord to make a solution to all the miseries of life. And that's all it takes. Just surrender to the feet of the Lord to make a solution to all the misery. We get the lesson of this every day of our lives. I think, oh yes, let me do this to make life more comfortable. Let me buy a more comfortable mattress. Let me buy a warmer blanket. Let me buy a nicer coat, and let me do this, and let me buy a wider screen TV, and so on and so forth. And let me go here, let me go there, let me do this, let me go on holiday to the Bahamas or whatever it might be. Everybody's trying to squeeze. And as Prahlad Maharaj describes, we're simply chewing the chewed. Simply chewing the chewed. Prabhupada says, somebody bites an orange and just squeezes the juice out of the orange and throws the skin away. Somebody comes along and picks it up and tries to get something out of that. That's all we can do. We just go around in a circle our whole life. And we're completely and totally attached to the body and the extensions of the body and the mind and then the intelligence and the ego. Even if we get past the gross feelings that we have for the body, we're still attached to the mind, we're still attached to the intelligence, we're still attached to the ego, and it just goes deeper and deeper and deeper. Before we know where we are, we're completely and totally drowning in an ocean of materialism, instead of drowning in an ocean of bliss. Chaitodarpana marjanam. These are the words of Mahaprabhu himself. Chaitodarpana marjanam. It is the life of all transcendental knowledge. It increases the ocean of transcendental bliss, and it enables us to fully taste the nectar for which we are always anxious. So what does it mean, for which we are always anxious? How can somebody who's a completely gross materialist be fully tasting the nectar or even desiring to taste the nectar for which we are always anxious, because we're all anxious for nectar. We are all anxious for happiness. And the problem is we just seek it in so many different material ways. And it leads us down the rabbit hole and to a point where we just can't get out. And then we're there. And then to find the way out, how do we get out? How do we see the light at the end of the tunnel? It can only be done through the mercy of Guru. Only. And we're realizing that more and more and more as we progress in spiritual life. We may theoretically accept that, oh yes, there has to be a guru and so on and so forth. But we realize as we're trying to make this progress on this path of self-realization, it's interesting, that phrase, self-realization. This is a book we sold millions and millions and millions of copies of that all over the world in so many languages. I remember when it was here in the late 80s, I had it translated into Swahili, and we sold so many copies in Swahili even. It's printed by National Printing Press in Kisumu. It is just such a brilliant book. But why self-realization? And another book that we sold many of copies around the world, The Journey of Self-Discovery. The journey of self-realization. If we don't understand who I am, if I don't understand who I am, how on earth can I understand God? How can I connect with Krishna? If I'm a part and parcel of Krishna, but I'm identifying with something else as being one nationality or one belonging to one religion or belonging to this society or friendship or love or whatever, then that's where my identity will go. So we can't just theoretically abandon the idea that I'm not this body. We have to actually put it into practice and really understand I am not this body. I'm spirit, soul. These are the basic things that we learn the first day we walk in the door of a temple. But these are the things that actually hold us back, because we continue, theoretically we appreciate, oh yes, you're not the body, you're spirit, soul, blah, blah, blah. But it's really, it's deep. This connection with this bodily identification, it runs very, very deep. So here Brahma is explaining that this connection with the body, it has to stop. And therefore it is best for me to surrender unto his feet, which alone can deliver one from the miseries of repeated birth and death. Such surrender is all auspicious. It's all auspicious. We had our famous eclipse today. I don't know if it's still going on or if it's over or whatever. America's on a different time zone. And the way to overcome, just like Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was born at the time of an eclipse. And what happened when he was born? Everybody was taking bath in the Ganga, and everybody was chanting Hare Krishna to overcome the effects of the eclipse. So Lord Chaitanya was welcomed into the world from his birth. People were chanting Hari Bol. So that was the early, very early signs from the time of his birth that this was going to be his mission in life. From the very birth, people were chanting the holy names of the Lord. So Lord Brahma is going on to say, such surrender is all auspicious and allows one to perceive all happiness. Even the sky cannot estimate the limits of its own expansion. So what can others do when the Lord himself is unable to estimate his own limits? Of course, it's not that the Lord is unable to estimate his own limits, but in a way he can't. He can't estimate his own limits. And Prabhupada gives the hint about that because the spiritual bliss is constantly expanding and expanding and expanding. And then Prabhupada goes on to say, of course, Lord Krishna can measure that expansion, but then it increases again, and he has to measure again, and it goes on unlimitedly. We have definitely got the experience of unlimited anxiety. But in the spiritual world, it's unlimited bliss. That is inconceivable to us. Everything in material life is complete opposite of the spiritual world. And we're enacting all these pastimes in the material sense, in the material world, thinking that they'll bring us happiness. But we're doing the opposite of what was actually good and what is for our ultimate benefit. Lord Brahma, Srila Prabhupada is saying here, he is the greatest of all, and all others, even the greatest of all living beings, namely Brahmaji, admits that the best thing for us is to surrender unto him. Therefore, only those persons with a very poor fund of knowledge claim that they themselves are lords of all that they survey. And what can they survey, Prabhupada says? They cannot even survey the length and breadth of a small sky in one small universe. And the materialists are very limited because we're limited by our senses. We may have the most brilliant and the most absolutely amazing computers, and we may have advanced so much. You know, we have all these ideas today of cyber attacks, and we can't live without the internet, and we can't do this, and everything is controlled by cyberspace. Everything. You can't do anything at all these days. I mean, I don't know about here in Africa, maybe to a lesser degree, but certainly it's going with M-Pesa. But in England, I don't remember the last time I used cash to buy anything. Everything is with a card, beep, beep, beep. And you know, we're not connected with the real world at all. Everything is controlled by the cyberspace. So that when we go off in a tangent, and then it becomes more subtle. The material energy becomes more subtle, and then as soon as it's switched off, bang, everything collapses. So the more we advance, the more subtle our advancement in the material sense, then the more we are dependent on it, and the more dependent on the subtle nature of the material energy, then the more we are entrapped again by something. Imagine 20, 30 years ago. Nobody had a mobile phone, nobody had an internet connection, nobody had Wi-Fi, and we survived. We survived. You know, life went on. You could still book a flight on an airplane. You could still travel around the world. Prabhupada traveled from India to Boston in 1965, and he didn't have any internet connection to book his ticket. And then Prabhupada flew all over the world, 10 times, 14 times, I forget whatever it was, that Prabhupada traveled around the world. No such thing as an internet connection. He communicated with his disciples. He fashioned this International Society for Krishna Consciousness. He molded it and put it in the direction in which it's going today, all without a single computer. In fact, Prabhupada, when the devotees installed a phone in 26 Second Avenue, Prabhupada said it's simply a botheration. When it started to expand and the movement started to grow, particularly when we got temples in Montreal and San Francisco and then eventually in London, then devotees would phone forgetting that it's 2 o'clock in the morning in America and it's a different time zone, and they would phone wanting to talk to Prabhupada. Prabhupada said, simply a botheration, just take it out. Rarely Prabhupada used the phone. And we know from tens of thousands of letters that Prabhupada wrote, which are in the archives, Prabhupada conducted everything by letter. When Srila Prabhupada arrived in Nairobi with the deities, he carried Radha Banka Bihari with him personally on the plane. Krishna went in the luggage and Radharani was on the seat beside Prabhupada. And when he arrived at the airport, there was nobody to greet him. Brahmananda didn't get the telegram. Prabhupada arrived at the temple in a taxi. But things went on. We survived. In the early part of the 20th century, nobody had a car. People were traveling by horse and cart. They survived. So it's not that we need all of this material attributes to function in our lives. Yes, they help. We're conducting this discussion now through the internet. So naturally, when Prabhupada went to New York and he was passing by a shop window that sold new technical equipment, Prabhupada saw the dictaphone in the window. Prabhupada was so astute. He saw it and he said, oh, this is good. And Prabhupada wrote all his books then through the dictaphone. Prabhupada purchased the dictaphone. And then he would give the cassette tapes to his disciples and they would type up the books and pass the typed manuscript back to Prabhupada for the corrections. And then Hayagriva came along as an English professor and he edited Prabhupada's books in the early days. But Prabhupada was the one who saw the use of this dictaphone. So everything can be used in the service of Krishna, but we cannot become slaves to these devices and slaves to this modern technology. We have to accept it for what it is, and we use it in the best way we can. Prabhupada says in the purport, anyone denying this surrendering process as recommended both in Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, and for that matter, in all authorized scriptures, and that's a fact. We discussed this yesterday in our Sunday feast talk, that all scriptures are authorized. Somehow or other, they may not have the absolute truth like the Bible and the Quran. Lord Chaitanya, in his discussion with the Chand Kazi, when Lord Chaitanya was protesting about the breaking of the Madanga and the banning of the Harinam Street Sankirtan, when he organized the protest to the Chand Kazi's palace, he had a discussion with the Chand Kazi. And Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was described in Chaitanya Charitamrita. That discussion was based on the Quran. So Lord Chaitanya recognized the Quran as a bona fide scripture. But he said, your Quran does not have the complete and total absolute truth. It has some aspects of the absolute truth, but the complete and total truth, the final Siddhanta is not there. And this is Lord Chaitanya in a discussion with the Chand Kazi, basing the discussion on the Quran. Lord Chaitanya was quoting the Quran. So that means it must be authorized. The Lord himself was quoting it. But he said it's not the absolute truth. So all the scriptures, as Prabhupada says here, that they're all authorized, and in all authorized scriptures, and for that matter in all authorized scriptures, will be forced to surrender unto the laws of material nature. The living entity, by his constitutional position, is not independent. So we know what the word constitution means. It's the very foundation of the laws of every state. So our constitutional position is dependent. Dependent on who? Depending on the Supreme Lord. Dependent on Krishna. So we cannot just simply say that, oh yes, I have independence. We do, to a certain extent. We have free will. But as Krishna said to Arjuna at the end of the Bhagavad Gita, now I've given you all these instructions, I've presented you with all this knowledge, deliver what you want to do. He completely and totally left it up to Arjuna. So that independence is there to that extent that we can choose ourselves whether to go towards what is beneficial ultimately for us, or we can go towards what is ultimately detrimental to our own personal interest. Because right now we don't know what our personal interest is or where our personal interest lies. We think our personal interest lies in mitigating or trying to mitigate the causes of anxiety. But all of that is covered by Krishna consciousness automatically. Just by engaging in the process of devotional service, anxiety is automatically mitigated. And the more we engage, then the greater the opportunities for further service. And it increases the bliss, the ocean of transcendental bliss for which we are always hankering. So we recite these mantras like Shri Shikshastakam every day, and so many other mantras that we recite every day, Panchakalpa Trubhasta, so on and so forth. But we have to take them into consideration and actually put them into practice. And really, in the introduction to Bhagavad Gita, Srila Prabhupada says, we must scrutinizingly study these scriptures. We must scrutinizingly study this Bhagavad Gita. Scrutinizingly means we examine every single word. Why is it that Prabhupada translated all of his books are translated word for word for word? In all the languages that we publish all around the world, regardless of the language, every single book has the word for word translation because each word has meaning. Each word can give us a direction. And as Prabhupada said so many times, I did not write these books. Krishna wrote these books. He just dictated to me and I put them into paper. Prabhupada says in the purport, by surrendering unto the Lord, one is happy and liberated. But by surrendering unto material nature, the living entity suffers. And this we have learned from so much experience. Still we try. Well, yes, I suffered on that occasion, but the next time I'll do better. And I'll overcome all these obstacles on the path to helping me increase my material attributes. So the end of all suffering means surrendering unto the Lord, because the surrendering process is itself bhavachidam, liberation from all material miseries. Swasthayanam, perception of all happiness, and samangalam, the source of everything auspicious. Therefore, liberty, happiness, and all good fortune can be attained only by surrendering unto the Lord, because He is full liberty, He is full happiness, and He is full auspiciousness. Such liberation and happiness are also unlimited, and they have been compared to the sky, although such liberation and happiness are infinitely greater than the sky. So this is the hint given by Prabhupada in the last line, where he's saying that Srimati Radharani, the transcendental person of Srimati Radharani, is the pleasure potency of Lord Krishna. Why? Why is she the pleasure potency of Lord Krishna? Because she's always, constantly thinking of ways by which she can increase the bliss and the service attitude to the Lord. And then Krishna is thinking of ways how he can please Radha. And she's thinking of ways how she can please him. And this goes on unlimited. This is inconceivable to us in our present state. Absolutely inconceivable. Because we are always thinking of ways how we can please ourselves. All we have to do is just switch that around 180 degrees and just switch it around, and then please and find ways of how we can please the Lord. And we all have our own individual approach to doing that, because we are all individuals. We're not simply one homogeneous mass of automatons who just, fall down and we all do whatever we are told. No, we're all individuals. We all have an individual relationship with the Lord. We all have an individual relationship with Krishna. And that will be manifest as we progress more and more and more on the path of devotional service. There's nothing to stop us, absolutely nothing. We just have to do it. Now we've reached this far. We've come to this stage in our development as devotees, as aspiring devotees, and we just have to continue on the path. As Prabhupada says, when for the son to inherit the wealth of the father, all he has to do is stay alive. That's all we have to do. We're already doing it. We're doing our day-to-day sadhana. We're doing our chanting. We're doing our Mahamantra. We're doing our Japa Mala. We're engaging in devotional service to the best of our ability, whatever our circumstances may be, attending programs whenever we can. That's fine. That's great. All we have to do is stick with it and have full faith in the Lord. Sarva dharman parijyaja mam ekam sharanambuja aham tvam sarva papebhyo mokshayi shashmi ma sucha. I will give you protection. I will give you protection. Do not fear. So this is it. And when we can just surrender to that, we just throw our hands in the air, say, okay, Hare Krishna, and then that's it. We're not in control. We're not the Ishvara. So it's very, very difficult. It's difficult for me. I'm not talking to you as the listener. I'm talking to myself. I have to remind myself constantly, I am not the Ishvara. I'm not the controller. I just do whatever I can and be guided by the Lord, be guided by the Chaita Guru, the Lord in the heart. That's all I can do. I can't do anything else. So the more we can realize that we're not the Ishvara, we're not the controller. Yes, we have a certain control over the aspects of our lives that we do from day to day. But ultimately, everything is completely and totally dependent on the Lord. Everything. The mercy of Guru and Krishna. And that takes, that's a very, very basic point. It's a very basic, intrinsic aspect of our philosophy that we learn practically the first day we walk in the door of a temple. But that is the deep stuff that may be on the surface appearing something superficial, but that is the deep stuff, to surrender to that thought, to surrender to the idea that I'm completely and totally dependent on the Lord. And it's all I can do is just increase the realization of that dependence day by day by day. That dependence is there anyway, whether I realize it, whether I don't realize it, whether I understand it or accept it even, that's there constantly. And the more we can dive into that, then the more we can understand, yes, that's how I make progress. That's how I will engage in service to the Lord, by simply surrendering unto Him. Why is it repeated 3 times in the shloka? Harinam, 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 Eva Kevalam. Kalona Steva, Nasteva, Nasteva, Gataranyata. 3 times. The Harinam, the Harinam, the Harinam is the only way. There is no other way. There is no other way. There is no other way. Because we have to ram it home constantly. Not just recite it once. We need to ram it home constantly. Krishna is not different from his name. All his transcendental qualities, the whole spiritual world is contained in the Maha Mantra. So we cannot take it for granted. We have to just completely and totally surrender to it. It's an effort, and we're weak, and we're struggling. But at the same time, we have the greatest philosophy, the greatest support. The whole Sampradaya is supporting us. The whole Sampradaya is wishing us well. The whole Sampradaya, Srila Prabhupada, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, all the Mahajans, they're all behind us. They came to give us this knowledge, to give us this wonderful bliss of a Vaikuntha world. They gave it to us, and they're wishing for on our behalf. I was reading just last week how Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj, when he was pushing the Gaudiya Math mission, and he was being guided by his father, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, in many ways, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj, he accepted Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur as his guide, as the spiritual guide, but he didn't take formal initiation from him, because that wouldn't be the process then. It would have set up a family dynasty. So Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur advised him to take initiation not from him, But when he set up his mission, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj, he was a very, very powerful preacher. I mean, he had a disciple of the status of Srila Prabhupada. And he had many, many disciples who were also very powerful. So he invited the governor of Bengal, the British governor, of course, at the time, and his entourage to come and visit in the mat in Mayapur. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, he ordered food from a hotel in Calcutta that would be to the taste of the governor. And he fed him this food that he wouldn't eat. He wasn't going to eat. But he had this guest. He wanted to preach to his guest. So he went out of his way to ensure that the guest was pleased and happy. He hired a Rolls Royce to bring the governor to the Gaudiya. He hired a Rolls Royce, laid on this ostentatious meal like a banquet of food that wasn't even eaten by the devotees. It couldn't be. He ordered it from a hotel because it couldn't be cooked in the temple. But we have to engage whatever possibility we have in the service of the Lord. This was the vision of an amazing personality on the status of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj. Whatever it takes to get the message across, whatever it takes to preach the mission of Mahaprabhu, this is what we have to do. We can't be limited by our own anarthas, by our own inequalities or our own inebriation. We just have to forge on. There's no suggestion that in order to please an honored guest coming to the temple, that we should serve them meat. That's not the point. And it certainly wasn't the point that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj was trying to make. But he said, whatever it takes to engage a person in the service of the Lord, we do that, whatever it takes. Krishna is unlimited. Krishna can preach in so many ways. I mean, at the end of the Kali Yuga, that's going to be described later on in this second canto. At the end of the Kali Yuga, of course, Lord Kalki will come because they're also demoniac, and the whole consciousness of the world is so down and completely and totally in the mode of ignorance. All he can do is just kill everybody, and that will be his preaching mission: to just kill everybody, go around the whole planet and just slaughter everybody because they're just so far gone. It was pointless to preach, a waste of time. Whereas you compare Lord Kalki with Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, complete opposite. But that is the mercy of Kalki, just like the mercy of Mahaprabhu. So we're in an age now, only 500 years since the advent of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and we have to take advantage and just dive in and just grab it for every opportunity. Forget about the obstacles. The obstacles will be there. The eclipses and the bad days and the good days, they will come and go. Everything will be upside down, everything will be topsy-turvy, because the material energy is designed to trick us into thinking that there's no way out, there is no other way. But there is another way. And we just forget about the obstacles, forget about all the traumas and trials and tribulations that we experience in life. They're just a part of the test. One must learn how to pass the test of the spiritual master. And then he would make further and further, and then the spiritual master will bless the disciple with much more progress on the path of devotional service. But it is a test. There's no doubt about it. Nobody said it was going to be easy. They crucified Lord Jesus Christ. Crucified him. And as he's dying on the cross, the last words he said was, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." Father, forgive them, they know not what they do. We just celebrated Easter, the resurrection of Jesus Christ. So these were his last words. Look at that kind of compassion. He's crucified, he's dying in an unbelievable amount of pain, And the last thing he said, Father, forgive them, they know not what they do. And this is a fact. So, as we progress on the path, as we work together to help each other to make this progress, then we will definitely experience this bliss, as Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says. It increases the ocean of transcendental bliss and enables us to fully taste the nectar for which we are always anxious. So, I think I'll end there. I'll just read the verse again. Therefore, it is best for me to surrender unto his feet, which alone can deliver one from the miseries of repeated birth and death. Such surrender is all auspicious and allows one to perceive all happiness. Even the sky cannot estimate the limits of its own expansion. So what can others do when the Lord himself is unable to estimate his own limits? There is no limit to love. There is no limit to love. It's constantly expanding. That's the nature of love. And this is our destiny, to dive into this ocean of love, which is just pure devotion to the lotus feet of the Lord. And then we will get that love back, and we will give that love, and it's a reciprocation, and it's constant, and it's expanding, and it's never ending. And then finally, at that point in time, we'll actually be happy. Otherwise, everything else is just banging our heads off a wall. Jai, thank you very much for your time. Thank you for your attention. Very grateful, as always. Thank you for bearing with me. And if there are any questions or comments, I'd like to take them now. Thank you very much. Hari Bol.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much, Prabhuji, for simplifying this session for us today. We have exhausted our time, but if there are any questions or comments, devotees feel free to ask, Prabhuji. I think there are no questions or comments. So we can probably end this session today. Prashanatma Prabhu, is it possible for you to quickly summarize what we learned today and then end the session?
Hare Krishna, Mataji.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. And what pronounce?
Hari Bol.
Devotees. Thank you so much. I joined it a bit late, so please forgive me for that. But I've heard mostly what Prabhu has mentioned about us being able to devote ourselves completely towards the movement. He's given many examples, including what I really noted is how our Param Guru, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Maharaj, his example on how he went out of the way just to preach. Of course, we can't do that, or we can't reach such levels. But yeah, we can see by his example, and we can take note and try to do more ourselves, just get out of our comfort zone and try to reach the next person and preach Krishna consciousness. So thank you so much, Prabhu. Won't take too much time because you're over time. I'll just request all the devotees that we may appreciate Vidura Prabhu for his inspiring words by chanting the Hare Krishna mantra once in its glorification. Please let's join. Hare Krishna, Hare
Krishna, Krishna
Krishna Krishna,
Hare
Hare
Hare,
Hare,
Rama,
Hare
Rama,
Rama,
Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Vanchakalpatarubhyascha
Patityanam pavanebhyo Vaishnavibhyo namo namaha. Dhantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Ananda Koti Vaishnavin ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, His Grace
Jai.
Vidura Prabhu ki jai, Eldoret Yatra ki jai. Thank you, Prabhuji. Also, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj, he started wearing suits and boots, which were against the Vedic
Yes.
culture. But he wore them
Yes.
just to attract his guests and to attract people to the movement and explain what is life. Thank you so much, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna. Hare
Right.
Krishna.
Thank you. Hare Krishna. Good night, everybody. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your time and
Hare
effort,
Bol.
Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Bol. Good night.